I've known Jane for a long time. It goes back to when I was a child, growing up in Preston.
I forget what year I did meet Jane, but I have known her most of my life.
I first heard about Jane in 1978, and I saw that she had offered herself to run for council.
I first met Jane in 1980 when I went on council.
When I really met Jane is when Jane came to work for the Preston Town Centre. When she was first elected, at that time it was alderman.
I actually got to know Jane, first of all, when I was the chair of the Business Improvement Association in downtown Preston, and Jane was actually our council liaison.
I've known Jane for a long time. I got to know her fairly well in the 1980s. She was a Cambridge councillor. I was on regional council as Mayor Woolwich, and when she came on to regional council in '85, we were there together. In fact, maybe people don't know this, but it was Jane who nominated me to be regional chair the first time I was elected.
Well, yeah, I've known Jane for quite a long time. It's been, I would think, going back to 1991 when I became a regional councillor. We've grown old together.
I've known Jane for 14 years, formally, when I first joined regional council.
I've known Jane, well, it makes it easy, 36 years, because this year was her 36th year of service.
A politician is, can be best described, the quintessential politician, which Jane is, can best be described by a person who does her things when people aren't watching. Jane was a dedicated person, a dedicated councillor who loved the region and loved Cambridge, and it showed in her work, in her commitment to the people that she served.
Well, Jane was a person who never really picked sides, but really allowed herself to be the person who was the band leader of what was happening. And she had the baton in a sense, and would be very, very objective and very, very fair in terms of dealing with all debates and all things that were happening.
So listen, I've had a great relationship with Jane Brewer for many, many years. In fact, I remember Jane when she was an alderman back when I got married. And as you well know, I got married when I was 7. So that's a long time ago. Jane will remember being an alderman. That was back when we actually ripped up the railroad tracks from the main street in Preston. Now we've come full circle on the railway thing and the light rail transit. So Jane's been around a long time. What I do respect about Jane, though, is her fierce advocacy for her community. As we all know, Jane absolutely listens to what people need, and then she fights very hard, and she fights in a very polite way. But she is a fierce advocate, very hard for folks to say no to Jane.
What I liked about Jane was a nice style she brought to regional council. She was elected out of Cambridge. She represented Cambridge first as a mayor and then secondly as a regional councillor. But she always had a broad view of things. She looked at things partly from a Cambridge perspective, but then she would say, well, how does this fit into the larger picture? And she always represented Cambridge interests well, I always thought, yet she had that big picture vision. And she had a way of doing it that it wasn't combative. It was, I've thought this out, I'm reasoned, I have the material, I have the facts, and here it is, and here's how I see it. And in that sense, I think she was a great representative for Cambridge.
Jane always had a great desire to keep people informed, to work for her community. She's the only councillor or mayor that I ever knew that worked on committees. She wasn't just a figurehead, she actually would be chair of a committee, something to do with transportation, something to do with development within the city of Cambridge. So it wasn't, or on the police service board or something, she wasn't just a figurehead, she actually work to make a difference in our futures for Cambridge. But when she stepped up and wanted to run for mayor, then I stepped up and worked on her campaign. And I said it's always been easy to work on Jane's campaign because she's such a wonderful person, and it's not hard to back a winner, too. So.
And I said to a friend of mine who sat next to her, who was going to be her opponent, and I said, you better watch out. She's a formidable opponent. And so it turned out. She beat him, and she beat every other fellow and every other gal that she ran against for, seems like, years and years.
We didn't always vote the same way on issues, but we did have respect for each other.
When she called and asked if we would be involved in the, or I'd be involved in the first, her first run for the mayor's chair, which was a treat, and as it turned out, was overwhelming. We had to find some committee rooms so that people could come and, you know, where to pick up posters and that sort of thing. And Jane had to have what had been an entire car dealership, and the whole showroom. We had over 500 volunteers in the first campaign for her being mayor. We didn't get that kind of response on provincial and federal elections. It was amazing.
Well, Jane's style as a leader was outstanding as far as I was concerned. She always demonstrated her leadership to the council and to the city of Cambridge, and served her constituents very well. And there was never any problems. As a matter of fact, I would have to say that she did an outstanding job.
Jane was a big influence on me around council. Not only did she try and tell me what to do all the time, but and how to vote, but no, she was really the guidance, I think. She was always, you know, really involved with her council members, and in particular, I think me. I like to actually say that she was kind of, I was under her wing and being groomed a little bit. But, you know, I think it was really, Jane Brewer was a type of individual that would say to you, I don't really care what your position is on this, but you really need to understand this about that particular subject. So, you know, she was very much a teacher, as well as my mentor, and as well as, I think, a great leader of council at that time.
Jane and I had a really great working relationship. She was actually what I consider to be a mentor for me. Her leadership style, from what I remember, was someone who was very dedicated to the community.
Just to say that she's a very special person, and I'm so happy she's in my life.
Jane had lots of interest at regional council. There wasn't any topic that didn't pique Jane's interest. But over the years, she was interested in social services, particularly housing. She was interested in the environment, and she served on the GRCA for us for a number of times. You name it, Jane was into it, and she researched and she knew her material. And if she took on a cause, you knew that she knew it well.
Jane has an interesting style of leadership as well. She's in no way autocratic. And can sit with a group of people and find the consensus. We don't need fights to solve problems. We need people agreeing to bring their strength to the table and make it work. And Jane is really a good consensus builder. Quiet, steady, faithful to the cause. And Jane says she'll be at a meeting at 10 o'clock. Guess what? Jane's always there at 10 o'clock. I got a call from Jane when it looked like the government wasn't going to fund our the growth of our hospital, and she said, "Would you attend some meetings to see if we can come up with some ideas on how we might get them to fund that?" I'm not a guru by any sense in anything having to do with politics, but she knew people who had that preoccupation with the community, and so she knows where the pockets of strength are, and she knows how to call on them.
You know, it's almost difficult to say, what did I learn from Jane Brewer? There's a wealth of things. I learned how to be strong and diligent and make up your mind and actually make that difficult decision. But I also learned how to be compassionate and caring. Jane was really big with that. In spite of the fact, I think, you know, I've often said that if the phrase "the Iron Lady" wasn't already taken, it would be Jane Brewer. She could be tough when she needed to be tough. But let me tell you, you never saw another individual that could be so strong, be so compassionate as well, and so caring about other people. And she always wanted to make sure that she did the right thing for people and right thing for our community.
One of my earliest memories of my mother was when she would take me to the downstairs at the Preston Public Library, the former one, and where she volunteered, and I would be set loose to run around there as she help people in the community. And that was something that was going to be part of what I saw in my mom all the time.
My relationship with her was more in the personal field, and I have found her to be a person with a good heart. And to me, that means a lot. And when I say somebody has a good heart, I mean that is the highest praise.
Jane and I have been friends. We've always contacted. We go out for supper together, and I love to go for supper with Jane and with some other people because I always learn something about the community. No matter anytime I've gone, I always learn something new. She's a good role model for me in that too. And I always said I would never retire until Jane decided to retire, and I said, and look at that, too. So I've got a few more years left, and I have to do that, too.
I'm going to miss Jane. She was not only a fellow councillor, but has become a close friend and will stay a friend for life.
It was a special privilege to work for Jane. She was always straightforward, always kind, and thoughtful.
Now, I got to tell you some things that people don't know about Jane. Jane probably doesn't realize that she's so well respected in this province. They actually named Brewer's Retail after Jane Brewer. So most people don't know that, right?
I always felt we were secure when she was in that post. She would never do anything underhanded. It was always above board and straight ahead, always.
She had dignity. She was never a person that you would be ashamed to have as mayor. Like, she had class. There's not a lot of people out there with that thing, but she.
Well, except the four of us.
Absolutely.
Well, yes, and our class is of a different kind.
I also knew Jane through the fact that we both attend St. Peter's Lutheran Church, and she's over the years been very committed and dedicated to her faith, and that's another quality that I admired about her.
She's a very dedicated mom and a very dedicated grandmother. I remember her telling me stories of things that she used to do with her grandchildren. Grandchildren in the States and her grandchildren here.
And her care about the community and her degree of honesty has just been a benchmark for people in public life. She's a great person.
Strong, sincere, absolutely honest, and a woman of integrity, and a person of passion.
So what will I miss about Jane? There's lots to miss about Jane. I'll miss her friendship, her warmth, her compassion. I'll miss our discussions on local politics, provincial politics, federal politics, on church matters because we haven't belonged to the same church. There's just so much. Jane brought a sense of caring, a sense of compassion, willingness to chat, an ability to talk about common things, and I think all the members of council will miss that.
I'm going to miss Jane's heartfelt, almost a genetic service orientation to her personality. And you know what? I know Jane's going to miss it too. I know that she would rather be still in this fight. And from somebody that is still in the fight, loves serving this community, I can tell her we're going to miss her contribution to winning for Cambridge.
Jane, I just, from the bottom of my heart, I just want to wish you all the best and success in the future. And I know that you're dearly going to be missed, and you miss the political side. But as you mentioned to me, it's time to look after Jane Brewer. So I wish you all the best, Jane.
I will miss her sense of humor. It's a very dry sense of humor, but and I'll miss her wisdom, her advice. She was able to direct me in some of the things that I was proposing at council. I'm going to miss that, but most of all, I'm going to miss our friendship as we both retire and go with our separate ways. And Jane, I hope that our paths will meet many times in the future.
Well, I'm never going to miss Jane Brewer, because Jane Brewer is still going to be a strong supporter of the Cambridge Chamber of Commerce. She's going to come out to events because I know she loved our events that we put on. Especially there were some unique ones that she really got involved with. So I'm not going to miss Jane Brewer. Jane Brewer is going to be in my life, and I know she's going to be in my life because that's the way she was. But in the political arena, I think there's no question about it. I think not just Greg DeRocher, not just the Chamber of Commerce, but I think the entire community of the region is going to miss Jane Brewer because she was always that calming voice, that voice of reason.
We haven't lost Jane. Because Jane's not a regional councillor doesn't mean that Jane is now retired and quits work. Jane's always going to work for this community. And whenever anybody has something of importance to do, or even something small and unimportant, phone Jane, and Jane will always be there to give you support and help you.
I looked up to her almost like a mom. I looked up to her as a leader, and I looked up to her as a woman with distinction. I think that's what I'll miss most. She's a wonderful person. I think the community is really going to miss her.
Well, I think that, Jane may have left politics, but she's still in the community and she's still out there. She's still out there in terms of coming to the chamber events. She'll be out whenever she can with regards to different things happening in the community. And she'll be that reminder to us all of what she has contributed and why this city is on such a strong foundation.
Well, I would like to say it's only right that the Chamber should be honoring you today because you've had a long and distinguished career. I personally salute you. However, I would like to say to remember there is life after politics, and you know where and when the girls meet for coffee. And we hope you will join us because there'll always be a seat at our table for you.
Too. It was a big decision for her to step down because her mind and everything is still so involved with the city of Cambridge and wants it to grow and wants to be able to contribute. But now that she's made the decision, I think I'm going to be interesting to see where she pops up again because I know that she's going to be there somewhere and will still stay involved in that too. And I said, I've just always been so proud to be associated with her because of what she stood for and what I learned and gleaned working in the city too. So it'll be different without her,
Not only did she win against all her opponents, but just recently when she said she wasn't running, she got over 4,000 votes. And I rather suspect that in 2018, there will be people who, when they don't see her name, will simply write it in because forever and ever we've had Jane Brewer to vote for.
And finally, the ultimate tribute to my mom was when, in spite of newspaper advertisements and posters in the different polling stations telling people, do not vote for Jane Brewer. Don't vote for her. She's not running. She still got over 4,000 votes.
I don't know any other politician that I've met in my 30 or 40 years of business that holds a candle to Jane when it comes to integrity.
People I've met since the last election, they'll tell me, I voted for your mom. And I say, why would you do that? And they always say the same thing. I just wanted one more chance to vote for Jane. And so, Jane, from your family, just congratulations as a role model and for all the things that you've demonstrated to your family about hard work and dedication and a life of serving others. I think that's something everybody should strive for, and we're all just so very proud of you. Thank you. Congratulations, Mom.